I want to show you now some examples of fixed design as opposed to fluid design, fonts and images. Let's start with fixed design. I'm going to open the index and style sheets. I already have them open actually right here. And what the index contains is basically a small container residing in a big container. So there's a div whose ID is container small residing in another div whose ID is container big. They're both the children of the body element. What we have in style is a background color of fuchsia for the body element with a margin 0, so that we're left with no space on the top and left corners. The container big is 900 pixels wide, 600 pixels high. It is black and it is centered on the page through the margin 0 auto property. The small container is 50% wide, 100% high. It is a dark orange color and it is centered on the page. So what this looks like is like this. So again, you see the fuchsia background color, the black big container, and the orange smaller container. Now look at the values. It says div container big width 900 pixels and it is centered on the page. So the black div is 900 pixels wide and it is centered on the page. The small div is 50% wide, but 50% of what is the question? We always look at the parent. If an element is nested in another element, it means its size, if in percentage, is relative to its parent. So when we say width 50% for container small, it means it is 50% the width of its parent, 900 pixels, which means it should be 450 pixels wide, which is exactly this case. We also gave it a height of 100 pixels, 100%, and that means it should be 100% the height of its parent, 600 pixels. That's why we see that the orange div is as high as the black div. Moving on to the next example, which is fluid design. Let me go ahead and close these HTML files first of all and open these new ones and just increase the font size so we see better. What we have here is inside of the body element we have a div whose ID is container big and it contains lorem ipsum, and it is styled as such that the body element is fuchsia, margin 0. The div is white, it is centered on the page, and it has a width of 30%. Let's see how that looks. So this is the fuchsia background for the body element. The div is centered on the page with margin 0 auto. It is white, as we can see, it has a white background color, and it is 30%. It has a 30% width. So the question is 30% of what? What we do is go back to index.html and look who the parent of div container big is. Div ID container has no parent besides the body element, which means that if its width should be 30%, it should be 30% that of its parent, the body element in this case. That's why you see that the width of the white container is 30% of the body or the screen, because the body element is the entire screen. Now if I scale the window down, you will realize that the div, the white div, scales down in size relatively to the size of the window, which means that no matter how wide the window is, the child div will always be 30% of its parent, because 30% is what is specified in the CSS, as you can see here. So if currently the window width is 1440 pixels wide, the div is 30% of 1440. If the window now is like 1100 pixels wide, the div is 30% of 1100 pixels. So this is the beauty of fluid design. Let's work with images now. So I'm going to open these two files, in Text Wrangler, and what we have is just an image in the body element, and it is styled such that there's a fuchsia color again in the body background, and the margin is 0. The image is 500 pixels wide. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, so this is 500 pixels of the entire width, and that fuchsia color, we don't see a margin on the top and the left. That's because we said margin 0 to the body element. And now, since we use the pixel unit here for the width of the image, when we scale the window down, the image size is not going to change, right? Because the image is not a percentage size of somebody else. It is a fixed size of 500 pixels. Let's say I change it to 800 pixels. Save, refresh. It's a big image. Obviously, it's losing resolution because I'm scaling it up. So it's 800 pixels right now, and it's not relative to any parent. I just forced it to be 800 pixels with the pixel unit. What if I say image 50%? 50%. What does that mean? It means it's 50% of its parent. Let's go and see who the parent of this image is. The image is not nested in a div, it's not nested in a p, it's not nested in any element except for the body element in this case. So the image is going to be 50% of the body. The body, remember, is the entire screen. So 50% of the entire screen, if I refresh the page by clicking on this, this is 50% of the screen. Let me exaggerate to show you better. Let me say 10%. 10% of the entire screen should be something like this big. Okay, so if I refresh now, okay, that's actually much smaller than I thought. So this is 10% of the entire screen. Okay, so this is again a fluid design. Let me change it back to 50 just to show you how scaling happens. Refresh. Now if I scale down my window, isn't this beautiful? So the image scales down or up with the size of the window, because the image always remains 50% of its parent, if that's the value we precised. Okay, so we worked with fluid and fixed designs. We worked with images and how they can be in a fluid or fixed website. Let's also work with fonts, and I have the fonts right here. So if I, first of all, let me close these open files and go ahead and open index and style to look at this font example. What do we have? We have, oops, just a P inside of the body element. The P contains a lorem ipsum. The style.css has that fuchsia background color for the body element. So what do we expect to see? We just expect to see the fuchsia background color with text on the fuchsia background color, and that's about it. Now the question is, how does the browser know to display, this is Arial, I can tell this is Arial. How does it know to display Arial? And again, I believe this is 16 pixels, right? Or whatever size. But how does the browser know to display this size and not a bigger size or a smaller size? Did we tell it anything in CSS? We weren't precise, right? We just chose this fuchsia background color for the background color of the body element. That's all we did. We didn't specify the size of the font or the color of the font or the typeface that we want. So what happens is the browser, if nothing is specified in the CSS, the browser goes to the preferences and sees what the default is there. So I happen to have my default font to be Arial and the size to be 16. So that's what the browser does unless I ask it to do otherwise in my CSS. So now if I change 16 to, let's say, 28, you obviously immediately see an increase in font size. This space that you see here is because the P element is one of those elements that have a default top and bottom margin, but we're not going to worry about that right now. The most important thing here is that we changed the default from 16 to 28 and the size increased. Now let's put it back at 16 and do some changes in CSS. Okay, what if we go ahead and say inside of the body element font size 12 pixels, right? So what we're doing here is we are telling the browser, we want you to read what's in style.css and make sure to make the font size equal to 12 pixels, okay? If this is 16 pixels, since that's what we specified again in the default of the browser, of Firefox's browser, if I now use 12 pixels in my CSS, we expect to see this decrease in size, right? So let me refresh the page, and this is 12 pixels. Okay, what if we say 1em instead of 12 pixels? Save. What do you expect to see now? So think about it. What is 1em equal to? If you look back at the lecture, 1em is equal to 100%, and it's equal to whatever is set in the browser, right? So now if I refresh the page, it's going to go back to 16 because 1em is equal to whatever size is specified in the browser. This doesn't mean that 1em is always equal to 16. If I change this 16 to another value like 40, 1em is going to be equal to 40. So 1em is equal to 100% is equal to whatever is specified in the browser. Normally 16 is specified in the browser. That's why usually 1em is equal to 16 pixels. What if we change 1em to 1.5em? Save and refresh this page. Obviously this is 24 pixels. Okay, so it increases in size. What if we say 80%? What happens now? Let's refresh. So this is smaller than 16 pixels, right? Because 1em is equal to 100% is equal to 16 pixels. But if we're saying 80%, it means 80% of 16 pixels, because 16 pixels, again, is specified in the browser. Okay, let's put the body font size, let's keep it at 12 pixels. And now go ahead and refresh the page. That's 12 pixels right here. And then open the P element, because this lorem ipsum is in a P element. Okay? So let's go ahead and say font size 100%. What's going to happen now? As we said, 1em is equal to 100% is equal to 16 pixels, right? So now if I refresh the page, do you expect to see 16 pixels? Let's see. So I'm going to refresh now. Okay, it doesn't. It stays at 12 pixels. Why is that? Because 100%, when we say 100%, it means 100% of the parent. Who is the parent of the P element? It is the body. So 100% of 12 means 12. So this doesn't change. This stays 12 pixels. And if I change 100% to 1em, again, nothing's going to change because it's 1em of the parent. The parent happens to be 12 pixels, so this is not going to change when I refresh the page.